Virtual choirs. They're happening. Especially if you're new to editing, they can be overwhelming. My goal here is to throw together a list for anybody who thinks that they could make their process more efficient, but might not know where to start. Pre-production. Have a plan. What style of video are you trying to do? Do you want a lot of featured singers? Do you want lyrics on screen? Do you want just a nice static image? Have something in mind. Be realistic about hardware limitations. Even if you dish out on software, understand that virtual choirs can be very resource heavy. That means you're going to be not only pushing your CPU or GPU depending on the software, but your computer also has to read a ton of videos off of your hard drive or solid state drive at the same time. All that to say, if you often get frustrated with your computer just while surfing the web and loading a couple Chrome tabs, you might want to find a different computer to edit on, if possible. If you can't find another computer, check to see if your software can use proxies. Proxies are a lighter weight, sometimes lower res file that's generated to be used as a placeholder for the full res files that you'll eventually render with. The idea is that you edit with the smaller files to be nice to your computer, and then they're switched out for the larger files when you go to export the final product. Consistency between performers. Before your performers record, take the time to address shot composition, orientation, and lighting. I was on time lapse. That wasn't probably gonna work, was it? Also, make a decision about frame rate. The most common frame rates you'll see on devices are 24, 30, and 60. Luckily, Apple products actually let you choose between these three frame rates. If you're new to video editing, I would set everything to 30 frames per second. Most webcams default to that, and iPhones are typically shipped with either 30 or 60 selected, and that division is pretty easy. It's going to be much less likely that a student accidentally changed their device to 24 frames per second. If a kid has an iPhone, have them film with it. Not only are the mics pretty good, but having the same tonal characteristic across all of the audio files will take one variable out of your editing. You're not going to have one performer super bitey and crispy and another one sound like they're coming through an old-timey radio. Have a direct upload method. What you don't want is a file that got all gross and compressed because it was trying to fit into an email. WeTransfer is good for this. Google Forms are actually fantastic if you have enough Google Drive space because they'll take all the files and package them into one folder for you. You can even take this to another level by downloading the backup and sync client from Google. If you set it up so that the Forms data folder automatically syncs locally, you can just let the submissions roll in and then they'll be right there for you when you want to go edit. All right, let's talk about editing. Do your audio and video in different software. If you have one program that does both really well, just do it in different sessions. Handle them separately. Pick one and have at it. I generally do the audio first, that way I have a rough cut of it to edit the video to. This is especially helpful if somebody's audio and video isn't quite synced up. This way you don't have to try to make a compromise and decide whether to have their audio synced up or their mouth moving at the right time. Batch-like tasks. If you're gonna have to do the same thing to every video, especially if it's prep work, do it to all of them at the same time. As an example, the most recent virtual choir I did was primarily edited in a 3D workstation called Blender. Before I even thought about the 3D aspect of it, I brought each file into Final Cut, timed it up, framed it up, and then exported it as a square. That way, when I dropped them all into Blender, they were all time aligned and I could just focus on the creative aspects. All right, now onto my favorite, keyboard shortcuts. What I view as one of the most helpful keyboard shortcuts in regard to virtual choir editing is the nudge left or right one frame shortcuts. In Final Cut, this is comma and period. What I'll do if I'm syncing a lot of files is I'll actually just line up the waveform by site and then play it, and while it's playing, I'll just nudge it in the direction that it needs to go until it lines up. Again, I have some firepower here, so that might depend on your hardware limitations. Another great one in Final Cut is Command-Shift-V. This one in particular is paste attributes. That way you can copy any position scale data, color correction data, or any other clip-based settings from one clip and apply it to a bunch of others at once. That's how it works in Final Cut because you can't actually copy individual effects. In other software like Adobe Premiere, you can actually just copy the effects themselves and paste them normally. Balance visual and numeric editing. What do I mean by that? Get used to having a calculator close by. Use any visual transform tools to get things in the right general area, but then use the numeric settings to get things perfect. Aim for whole numbers, so if you have to divide things, it gets easier. Edit to the energy of the piece. As a starting place, try matching intensity levels. More intense music, more cuts and faster movements. Gentle, slow piece, slower motions in longer shots. Maybe throw a crossfade in there somewhere. Final step of the process, exporting. Do some research on your software to figure out the most efficient settings. If you have the option to render using an H.264 codec, that's usually a pretty safe option. The less compressed and more data dense a file is, the longer it's going to take you to render it. If you have overly large or even like massive file sizes, we're talking, over 4 gigs for a 4-minute 1080p video, you're probably wasting a lot of time rendering. Well, that's it. Hopefully you found something interesting in these tips, and obviously if you have some tips for efficiency of your own, leave those down below in the comments. I would love to hear them. Best advice I can give outside any of these tips is just keep things simple at first. Start learning the concepts before you try to bite off more than you can chew. Also, the cost of your own time is a very real idea. So if you don't find that you enjoy doing these, that's why people like me exist. Find someone local who can, if not do the whole video for you, at least do some of the prep work so that you can do the fun parts. With that being said, if you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below. I will happily answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you next time.